Welcome to You Certify CompTIA Cloud CV0-004 Must Know Glossary Terms Part 2.
Term, object, definition. A measurable property of some resource, like CPU utilization of VM. Term, object ID. Definition. A pointer to a stored piece of data that is a globally unique identifier.
Term, offline storage. Definition. Storage that requires an administrator to make it available by inserting a tape or other media into a storage system for retrieval. Offline storage can be transported to remote storage facilities or stored in vaults for protection.
Term, on demand. Definition. The ability of consumers to access self-service portals to create additional cloud services on demand. Term, online storage. Definition. A storage system that can be accessed at any time without the requirement for a network administrator to mount the media into a storage system. Term, orphaned resources. Definition. Cloud-based services that are left over when a service terminates and are no longer needed or used. Term, outage time. Definition. The total time of a single outage measured from when the outage began until it ended. Term, packet loss. Definition. The percentage or number of packets that are dropped in the network.
Term, patch. Definition. Software that is intended to update an application, operating system, or any other software-based system to fix or improve its operations. Term, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, PCI DSS. Definition. Sets the requirements to guarantee that companies which process, store, or transmit credit card information offer secure processing and handling of credit card data. Term, penetration testing. Definition. The process of testing your cloud access to determine whether there is any vulnerability that an attacker could exploit. Term, performance testing. Definition. Testing that puts a demand or load on your application or compute system and measures the response. Term, ping. Definition. A command line utility that is used to verify that a device is available on the network and to get a reading of the response time at that moment in time. Term, point-to-point tunneling protocol, PPTP. Definition. Allows a remote PC or network to access a remote network, such as a cloud, by encapsulating PPP packets inside of GRE tunnels. Term, privilege escalation. Definition. A user or service receiving account privileges that they are not allowed to possess. Term, production environment. Definition. An environment that hosts the live and in-use applications that an organization uses in its normal course of business. Term, public key infrastructure, PKI. Definition. A standardized set of roles, policies, and procedures used to create, manage, distribute, use, store, and revoke digital certificates and manage public-private key encryption. Python. A high-level programming language. Term, quality assurance/test environments. Definition. Environments that are used for the testing of software updates or new applications. Term, quality of service, or QoS. Definition. A general networking term for the ability of the network to provide differentiated services based on information in the Ethernet packet. Term, recovery point objective, RPO. Definition. The restore point that you recover to in the event of an outage. The RPO is the amount of data that may be lost when restarting the operations after a disaster. Term, recovery time objective, RTO. Definition. The amount of time that a system can be offline during a disaster. It is the amount of time it takes to get a service online and available after a failure. Term, redundant array of independent disks, RAID. Definition. Involves combining physical disks to achieve redundancy. Term, replication. Definition. The process of placing copies of stored data on more than one system for disaster recovery and resiliency purposes. Term, Representational State Transfer, REST. Definition: a protocol that communicates between devices over HTTP/HTTPS. This is a method of providing device communications over IP networks.
Term: resource pooling. Definition: the allocation of compute resources into a group or pool. Then these pools are made available to a multi-tenant cloud environment.
Term: response time. Definition: the time to complete an operation. Term: reversed cipher 4, RC4. Definition: uses a shared key to encrypt and decrypt a stream of data. RC4 was commonly used to secure wireless connections and web transactions as an encryption protocol used in SSL. Term: reversed cipher 5, RC5. Definition: the replacement for RC4. It is also a symmetrical block cipher algorithm that uses a variable length key. Term: reverse Shamir Adleman, RSA. Definition: an asymmetrical encryption that uses a private key and a public key. PKI is the framework that uses protocols such as RSA for encryption. With PKI and RSA, the common implementation is an asymmetrical protocol using a public and private key pair, such as RSA, to set up an encrypted connection to exchange symmetrical keys. Then the symmetrical keys are used to perform bulk encryption and decryption since they are faster and require less processing. Term: role-based access control, RBAC. Definition: a method in which access rights are granted to or restricted from users based on which roles they perform in an organization.
Term: rollback. Definition: the process of returning software to a previous state. Term: route command. Definition: a command line utility that displays the workstation's or server's local routing tables.
Term: runbooks. Definition: software processes that perform automated tasks and responses that simplify and automate repetitive tasks.
Term: scripting. Definition: a method of running configuration commands in the cloud to automate cloud deployments and security services. Term: secure shell, SSH. Definition: an encrypted command line interface utility that is used to access a remote device.
Term: secure sockets layer, SSL/transport layer security, TLS. Definition: protocols that operate on top of TCP and provide an encrypted session between the client and the server. Term: security policy. Definition: a document that defines your company's cloud controls, organizational policies, responsibilities, and underlying technologies to secure your cloud deployment.
Term: service level agreement. Definition: a document that outlines specific metrics and the minimum performance or availability level and outlines the penalties for failing to meet the metrics.
Term: service organization controls, SOC1. Definition: also known as SSAA 16 and ISAA 3402. This is a report that outlines controls on a service organization and the internal controls of financial reporting operations. Term: site mirroring. Definition: the process of keeping the backup site updated so that it's ready to assume the workload in the event of a primary site failure. Term: snapshot. Definition: an instance-in-time image for rollbacks or backups. Term: SOC2. Definition: a report that concerns a business's non-financial reporting controls for availability, confidentiality, privacy, processing integrity, and security of a system.
Term: SOC3. Definition: a report for public disclosure of financial controls and security reporting.
Term: subnet mask. Definition: segments an existing IP address in a TCP IP network and divides the address into the network and host addresses. Subnetting can further divide the host portion of an IP address into additional subnets to route traffic within the larger subnet. Term: synchronous replication. Definition: the process of replicating data in real time from the primary storage system to a remote facility. Synchronous replication writes data to both the primary storage system and the replica simultaneously in order to ensure that the remote data is current with local replicas. Data is always consistent between replicas.
Term, tabletop. Definition, a role-playing exercise wherein a group of people respond to a hypothetical incident.
Term, telnet. Definition, a virtual terminal application that allows for command line logins to a remote device.
Term, templates. Definition, software representations of network systems. By using these templates, you can deploy complete cloud systems at a single time. Term, thick provisioning. Definition, the allocation of all the requested virtual storage capacity at the time the disk is created. Term, thin provisioning. Definition, the allocation of the minimum amount of the requested virtual storage capacity required at the time the disk is created.
Term, tracer/tracer route. Definition, a command line utility used for network path troubleshooting. This utility shows the routed path a packet of data takes from source to destination.
Term, trigger. Definition, the process of initiating an event report based on a metric value or threshold that is considered to be outside your baseline. Term, triple data encryption standard, 3DES. Definition, a symmetrical cipher. 3 encryption keys of various lengths are used. The first key is used to encrypt a block of data, a second key is then used to decrypt the block, and a third key is used to encrypt it again. This triple encryption function on each block of data is reversed to decrypt the data. Term, troubleshooting. Definition, the process of diagnosing the cause of impairment and resolving the issue. Term, ubiquitous access. Definition, the ability to access cloud services from anywhere in the network from a variety of devices. Term, variance. Definition, the measurement of the spread between the baseline and measured result. Term, version update. Definition, replacing a software product with a newer version of the same product. Version updates can add new features, bring the system up to date, provide a roll-up of all previous patches, and improve the product. Term, vertical scaling. Definition, a scaling that involves replacing the current machine image with that of a larger offering that has additional CPU capacity, such as higher clock speeds or more cores.
Term, virtualization. Definition, hardware abstraction that allows a single piece of physical equipment to be presented to software systems and multiple platforms. Term, vulnerability testing. Definition, a testing that is used to find objects in your cloud deployment that can be exploited, which are potential security threats. Term, warm site. Definition, a disaster recovery backup site where the remote is offline except for critical data storage, which is usually a database. The rest of the site infrastructure needs to be enabled. Term, workflow. Definition, a series of steps or activities required to complete a task. Term, workflow automation. Definition, defines a structured process for a series of actions that should be taken in order to complete a process. Term, workflow services. Definition, track a process from start to finish and sequence the applications that are required to complete the process. Term, address resolution protocol, ARP. Definition, a protocol that determines the mapping of an IP address to the physical MAC address on a local network. Advanced Encryption Standard, AES, a symmetrical block cipher. AES has been approved and adopted by many governments, including the United States and Canada, to encrypt sensitive data. AES has also been adopted as a standard by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Term, anomaly. Definition, a metric that is either above or below your expectations. Term, application lifecycle. Definition, the management of a software application from the initial planning stages to its retirement. Term, application programming interface, API. Definition, the means to access, control, and configure a device programmatically between different and discrete software components. Term, asynchronous replication. Definition, writes the data to the primary storage location, and then later sends copies to the remote replicas. With asynchronous replication, there will be a delay as the data is copied to the backup site and becomes consistent because it uses a store and forward design.
Term: authentication. Definition: the process of determining the identity of a client, usually by a login process.
Term: automation. Definition: software systems operating in a cloud provider's data center that automate the deployment and monitoring of cloud offerings.
Term: autoscaling. Definition: a cloud feature that automatically adds and removes resources based on demand.
Term: availability zones. Definition: isolated locations within data center regions that public cloud services originate and operate.
Term: backup target. Definition: the endpoint or storage system where the backup data is to be stored.
Term: backup window. Definition: the time available for the backup operation to run while the target storage system is either offline or lightly used.
Term: business continuity plan. Definition: a plan that recognizes that there are inherent threats and risks that can have a detrimental effect of a company, and that defines how to protect the company assets and be able to survive a disaster. This gives an organization the ability to continue operations and to deliver products and services after an event that disrupts its operations.
Term: call tree. Definition: a hierarchy of who is responsible for informing who of high-impact incidents. Term: capacity. Definition: the end-to-end metric for maximum available network bandwidth and utilized capacity, or rate, from source to destination. It can also be the maximum amount that something can contain, or, in the case of cloud resources, the maximum supported capacity of any object or service. Term: change advisory board. Definition: supports the change management team by reviewing, sequencing, and approving changes that have been requested, by determining the priorities, and by planning for all upcoming changes. Term: change approval. Definition: the process dedicated to approving or denying all change requests submitted by an organization's IT operations. Term: change management. Definition: the process of managing all aspects of ongoing upgrades, repairs, and reconfigurations. Term: cipher. Definition: any method of encrypting data by concealing its readability and meaning. Term: cloud bursting. Definition: an elasticity model where a primary data center carries the current compute load, and when additional capacity is required, a remote cloud can assist with the load. Term: cloud computing. Definition: outsourcing of data center operations, applications, or any part of operations for a provider of computing resources. Term: cloud object storage. Definition: storage data, such as a common file, that is paired with metadata and combined into a storage object. Term: cloud segmentation. Definition: the process of dividing the cloud deployment into small sections to allow for granular security policies to be applied. Term: cloud service provider. Definition: a company that hosts computing systems and sells computing to consumers. Term: clusters. Definition: groups of computers interconnected by a local area network and tightly coupled together. Term: cold site. Definition: when the backup data center is provisioned to take over operations in the event of a primary data center failure, but the servers and infrastructure are not deployed or operational until needed. Term: co-location. Definition: a shared data center operation offered by a service provider. Term: configuration management. Definition: uses a central repository for storing, archiving, and tracking resource configurations. Term: console port. Definition: serial port for CLI access. Term: CPU affinity. Definition: the ability to assign a processing thread to a core instead of having the hypervisor dynamically allocate it. Term: CPU wait time. Definition: the time that a process or thread has to wait to access a CPU for processing.
Term: data archiving. Definition: the movement of inactive data, infrequently accessed data, or data that is no longer being used to a separate storage facility for long-term storage.
Term: data center. Definition: a facility housing computing systems. Term: data classification. Definition: organizing data into different tiers or categories for the purpose of making data available as required and to meet regulatory requirements, mitigate risk, manage risk, and secure data. Term: Department of Defense Information Assurance Certification and Accreditation Process, DIACAP. Definition: the process for computer systems IT security. DIACAP compliance is required to be certified to meet the U.S. Department of Defense security requirements for contractors.